From time immemorial, the sovereign nations have inhabited, protected, and preserved the land that is so-called Canada. We acknowledge this fact. The land we serve is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, and the Chippewa. Reelworld's offices are in Toronto, which is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Thank you to the Reelworld Festival, particularly Sophia Abdagir, for organizing this panel. My name is Aditya Agarwal. I'm a writer and film curator based in Toronto. Today, for the Reelworld Digital Day, we're going to be talking about developing the fostering and nurturing relationship between an actor and a director. It's my pleasure to welcome our formidable filmmakers and beautiful panelists, director, cinematographer Rolla Tahir, and actor, writer, director, producer Aisha Evelyna. Rolla and Aisha, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear your insights about the term of engagement between a writer and a director, and how you approach this dynamic in your, multifarious roles in filmmaking. So before we get into it, I'd like to begin by asking both of you to introduce yourselves for our audiences and briefly tell us about your personal ways into filmmaking. Journey to cinematography and direction for you, Rolla, and the path to both acting and direction and writing for you, Aisha. Either of you can begin.
Rolla, you take it away. I haven't heard from you in a while.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks again to Reelworld for having me on this panel. Aisha and I know each other for a couple of years. We were in the same cohort at Berlin. So I'm excited to talk to you and hear from you, Aisha. So I got into film. I studied film. Initially, I thought, I just fell in love with everything to do with cinematography, and I still practice that now. But my way into being a director was actually kind of interesting. I was in a filmmaking program with a small cohort of filmmakers, and we all submitted a script, and then collectively we choose 2 scripts to collectively produce as a team. Anyway, my script got chosen, and then someone else got to direct it, and then I just sat there watching as somebody sort of completely misinterpreted my intention as a writer, and it was very interesting to see, and obviously a huge learning opportunity, but it was also very difficult because it was a bit of a personal film. It's actually the film where Jude and the Djinn, the feature I'm working on right now, came from. And so, something that I wrote to be sort of this magic realist semi-drama ended up being sort of like a very theatric rom-com. Anyway, from then on, I was like, I might have to direct. So that's that's how I came into it.
It's not funny, but it is funny. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, how did that happen? Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Evelyna. I use she, her pronouns. I went to theater school to become an actor. And then I got out of theater school. I was at York University, and I did their conservatory, and then I got kicked out. And then I finished my degree in theater, not because I was bad, because I was sad. It's a whole other thing. But then I did but I'm happy now, I swear. And then I did my, degree in theater studies with specialized honors in theater studies. Anyway, all to say, I got out and I was auditioning, that kind of thing. But it was really lonely, to be honest. I kind of found myself as an actor, unless you're 1 or 2 on the call sheet, you kind of just go into a honey wagon, like a trailer, and you just wait there all day. And I just found it was lonely, even though I had community with auditioning and stuff. It just didn't feel the same. And so I was like, okay, well, I have to be a number 1 or 2 on the call sheet then. So then I was like, I wrote myself a role to, and I was like, I'm going to make a short film. And at the time I thought I was making it so that I could like show everyone how like talented I was because, geez. But really, I think I did it because I was just so lonely and really craving like collaboration and artistry in a real way and like making something with others, having an opinion, hearing others, the opinions of others. And so from there, I made a short, and then I made another short, and then it was one person. Her name is Liz Frazier. She was like, "When are you going to direct something?" And I was like, "LOL, when?" I never thought of that, but she was the person that asked me the question. And then I directed a short in 2019. I've just kind of been directing and motoring along ever since, kind of just serving projects in various capacities as a writer, director, or an actor.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really kind of illuminating to hear how both of you arrived at direction through a desire for collaboration and probably a need for better trust building, perhaps, which also feels very much a big feature of director-actor relationships. And Aisha, you mentioned your short, and I was thinking about your self-directed short, Alex, in which you direct yourself as well as other actors. And in the film, you deliver this very tense and immediate portrait of Sydney, a name you've played in different characters that are named Sydney that you have also played in the past. But Sydney in Alex is a young Black woman who is accompanying her friend to a clothing store after she's accused of shoplifting by the white sales associate. And I just thought the series of reactions and internal realizations that we can see kind of, you communicating through your body and your face while trying on the outfits and, while accusations are being hurled at your character were so well timed. They were so subtle yet so visceral. Tell us about the choices you made in portraying Sydney in this film that you directed yourself. What is it like to direct yourself as well as the other actors on set?
Oh, okay, great question. So Alex is the third in like a triptych, I guess, in a way. Like I kind of didn't go to film school, so I was just like, I did not go to film school. So 2017, I made my first film that I was talking about, and the character's named Sydney. And then another film called Shoegazer, the character's named Sydney, and then in Alex, the character's named Sydney. It's basically the same character throughout. And so to answer your question, I think it's kind of twofold. Sydney it's kind of like a woman trying to understand her place in the world and via her Blackness, but also via how the world understands her as a Black person. And it exists in various iterations in those three films. And so when it comes to choices and that kind of stuff, I'm like heavily into improv. When I was an actor that just got out of school, I took a lot of Meisner with somebody named Sean Benson. And Meisner is about just like living truthfully under imagined circumstances and like really just listen to the person in front of you. And like that's the same thing with improv in many ways. So like I had a script, but if something better came up on set, we would just go with that. And we had like what I like to do, specifically like when it comes to like craft is I like to rehearse on the set if possible. Sometimes you don't need to, but I feel like I was like in order for me to know what the sight lines are and also for the actors to get familiar with the space, that's what I wanted to do. But when it comes to like the performance choices, I didn't really, it sounds bad, I didn't really think that much. I was kind of just like, I mapped out the arc. I was like, the character starts here, character ends here, and like there are a couple of things that need to happen that we need to see. And if I were smart enough, I wrote those things into the script that I would just follow the script and listen to the actor in front of me, and then I wouldn't have to self-generate too much. I think the second that an actor is really generating in here and not paying attention to what's going on out there, that's kind of a territory where you should try to steer away from. So yeah, I would say that's how I would answer that. The choices, I didn't really make choices. I just kind of let the actors inform my choices, and then we made a movie.
That sounds very relational and sounds like quite a fluid kind of way of engaging with your actors and yourself as an actor too while you're directing. It almost makes me think about how the shorts, working on shorts becomes like a training ground almost for your upcoming features for both of you. Rolla, you as well have worked on documentary, experimental, and narrative across narrative forms, genres. I was thinking about your 2019 narrative short film, Terracine, and in particular, the lead protagonist of the film, Jude, played by Nina, in which Nina delivers such a sensitive and fine portrait of this aloof but beloved and doted on young woman who seems to be the daughter of an immigrant parent with precarious status. Tell me about your experience of guiding and bringing forth this moving performance from Nina, as well as the other actors in your film. Was it similar to Aisha's, where improvisation and kind of this, spontaneity or being present was kind of key, or do you lean on other kind of tools to extract these performances?
I think it depends on the project. For the Racine in particular, again, because it's a personal film, I had, spent a lot of time with Dina before the film, just talking about the script itself, but also her character. It's essentially a two-hander between a daughter, like father and a daughter. And so, I just gave her the opportunity to ask questions, but I also, I think also letting her inform some of the come to the character herself, find correlations between the character and her own experience. And thankfully, and I've noticed that, I haven't done too many narrative films, but in the ones that I have done, just by virtue of the type of stories that I'm telling from specific communities, specific experiences, you will find threads of commonality between the actor and the character. But it was interesting to see, because Deracine is kind of like not fully a concept of Jude and the Jinn, but a concept of the relationship that then I expanded in the feature that I'm working on now. But it was really interesting to see how different actors come at the same or a similar character in two different ways. I think, like I said, with Dina, we just had a lot of opportunity to talk about the character and the story, but with in the feature film with the actor's name is Azza Avaro, who is actually, like, Dina has a background in acting. Azza somewhat like an experience in school, but is not a professionally trained actor. But the way that she came at it and the way that sort of I developed the character with her is a lot more was interesting for me to find. Like, I didn't go in the process being prescriptive, saying this is how we're going to do things. I let her also, again, inform the process. And I found that we ended up talking a lot about what it is that the character is thinking about in that moment, as opposed to what is the character feeling, which in the end, I think worked really well for what we were trying to do for June. But it's, again, it depends on the project, because then, like you said, I worked on a documentary, which I would call a hybrid documentary, the way that the process for that looked very different, for example. So I think it's just, for me, I'm in a stage where I'm still, because I also don't have a background in acting. I took a workshop, and I very much respect actors, but it is not my thing. So for me, it's still about understanding the different ways, different processes. And I think it's, I mean, obviously a lot of it is about communication, but it's also about understanding how the person in front of you, how they receive information. So it's all, yeah, it's still very much a learning process for me. And I'm just, the one thing that I'm finding out is that it depends on the project.
Yeah, I think like reacting, as often as people often say, acting being reacting, akin to reacting, also holds true in the director-actor relationship, where you are kind of responding to your actor and the actor is responding to your guidance. And Rolla, you mentioned just kind of having to contextualize the particular emotional beat of a scene, of a project. And I'm just observing so much versatility in the work of Aisha here, where after, or like, there's Alex on one side where there's a very serious tonality, but then on the other hand there is Narcity's web series The Drop, which Aisha has directed episodes of and acted in as well, which features this very almost like Broad City-esque kind of quirky, kind of navigation of Toronto across situational comedy with two friends, Polly and Zara. Again, a very different emotional pitch and genre. This one is definitely more comedic, and perhaps even like it has a certain light-footedness, lightheartedness about it. So for Aisha, how did you kind of, while directing yourself as the actor and the entire episode, how did you communicate tone or certain affect to your actors, and how do you kind of ensure that those instructions or those emotional beats are seen in the film or in the series?
I think when it comes to getting the performances, I think it really starts in the prep and the casting of it, to be honest. I think for myself, I like to work with easy actors. And when I say easy, it means that not even easy. I like to work with independent actors, like strong and wrong. Like when I was in school, they said strong and wrong, like make a decision and like stick to it. So that way, like, then it's more a matter of me being like, whoa, I've got this cool thing to work with. I can just shape it a little bit and be like, maybe a little less there and maybe like amp that up there, as opposed to having to like really craft from the bottom up, from the ground up. I think because like Daniela, my co-creator, and I held so many roles, we didn't really have the time or the bandwidth rather, to start from the ground up. But then also so much of it is in the writing. The characters inform so much in the writing. And so when it comes to like bringing these performances to screen and bringing the language to the screen, the colorful nature of it, it's all like a good script will really help you. You know what I mean? It's the roadmap. And so when I think about how did I guide these performances, to be really honest, I think because I think personally, because I have an eye for performance, because I do perform, I'm relatively hands off. And I think that's really helpful for you, allowing your actor to come to you. Like be there, be like, I'm here for you, but like, fly, birdie, fly. I think you can fly. Like being the supportive person there to be like, I'm rooting for you. And if they have a question, then you can talk about it. Then you can answer any questions. But for me, when I think about the planning of this, it's like it came from the casting, it came from the script. It's like it's all kind of baked in there from its inception. And then from there, it's like I like to work with actors that like come in with having a decision, a choice. They've made a choice where they're like, this is me, this is what I'm bringing. And then you can kind of taper it. So yeah, that's what I'd say about how we got those performances. And then also the last thing I'd say is we were just like, we had really great actors in the series. So like Mark Little is a really talented comedian. Like he's great. Like you just let him do his thing. Like sometimes you just like let the camera sit and watch him. That's Mark Little. And then same thing with we had Aurora Brown, and Aurora Brown was on Baroness One Sketch, and she's Aurora Brown. So like you kind of just put a camera there and watch her. And I think it's just like allowing these people allowing them to shine, giving them the space, giving them the room to take up space will allow them to flourish. So for me, I'd say that's how I got those performances, and like just relying on a team of people that are all just like there to be excited. We're all excited about it, and it's just like if the actors are happy, then more often than not everyone else is happy. So keep your actor happy. Don't like be weird about keeping them happy. Like if they're being annoying, put them in their place. But like if the actors are happy and you give them the space to flourish, you just put a camera there and just like allow what they bring, shape what they bring, as opposed to imposing too much, because more often than not what someone else is going to offer you may be way better than what you even had imagined in your head.
I really appreciate that. I think so much of comedy is about timing, and I think you really nailed you nailed the temporality of that. And it sounds like letting your actors be, allowing sense of comfort, ease of communication is so crucial, and really reminds me, Rolla, of your documentary practice, where so much of documentary work is about observation. There's an inherently observational quality to documentary and requires a high level of trust building between and an ease between the interlocutors and the interviewees, or your subjects and the person behind the camera. I'm thinking in particular about the very light touch and the finesse with which you frame and situate real life Torontonians who are multi-generational. They're Arab Canadians, East Africans, Southeast Asians, in the physical location of a shisha bar in your docu-hybrid film Ahwa, which I believe was I believe came out or related to the context of shisha bars in Toronto being under threat of closure in 2015. Tell us about your documentary practice and how that may or may not have informed your narrative work, and how you started to work with your actors in Jude and the Jinn, because essentially documentary films have real life figures, but in narrative forms you're asking your actors to realize these fictional beings. So what do you carry with you from your documentary practice towards directing actors in narrative films?
I think what I carried from Ahwa, or from the docu practice to narrative, is really what you said, Aditya, which is observation. If I had to sum up my practice across the genres, across the, everything that I do, it's really experimentation and observation. And so in Ahwa, basically what I did is I put out a casting call for people who would, frequent shisha cafes in Toronto. And I told them that this is going to be sort of a directed documentary, meaning that, I had certain overarching questions and themes that I wanted to address in order to link all these various stories together that I would ask them. But I also just told them to show up and basically smoke shisha for 2 hours. And, you can imagine how fun and comfortable people, like the whole point of a big part of why I made this film is I wanted people to understand how important these places are, and what are the and how much of a sort of comfort and safe place it is for the people that go there. And so a lot of it is just creating an environment that people find comfort in. And, I had it easy. Just honestly, it's like inviting someone out for a drink. I don't drink, so I don't know what that's like, but I can imagine that that's what it's like. It's just, or maybe it's not. I don't know. Shisha is just like, it brings people together. You can be there smoking by yourself, and then someone who you've never seen before is at the next table, and then you'll just become best friends. And honestly, this is how I've come to know a lot of the people that I know in my life right now. Like literally, this was I came here to Canada as an international student, and this was my home away from home. And so with Ahwa, it was just super easy to create that comfort space for people. And so what I took from that is that if you, just give actors an opportunity to bring to the story or to the character something from their own experience, finding that alignment is very helpful. But also from my background as a cinematographer, I also, and also just like a lot of the filmmakers that I love who are inspirational, giving the actors, like you said, Aisha, giving them this literal space, physical space to just be, really. They'll surprise you. And again, in my feature film, like Azza, who I worked with, like there were so many instances where I just basically I tell her, this is the space. I don't give her, this is beat 1, beat 2. Sometimes I do if it's recommended, but sometimes I just let her do her thing. And based on the conversations that we've had before about where this character is in her life, where she was, where she hopes to be, you would find like actors will surprise you as how and that's a part of finding the right actor as well. And so there's that, and there's also what I like to do, which again kind of happened during Ahwa, is sometimes, depending on the scene that we're doing, I like to direct as the camera's rolling. And by direct, I just mean like, you know, I don't know, maybe take a puff of smoke or something. It's not like nothing heavy, but just giving. One thing that we don't have a lot of opportunity to do as independent filmmakers, working with so little, money and time, is the room to breathe, the room to observe, the room to rehearse and experiment on location on the day. Like, if we had that space, I think magic
Canadian film
can
would be a
happen.
million times better.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's one thing that I will take on to the next project, is just factoring in more room for actors to be on the day, as opposed to like back-to-back scene shooting, coverage this and coverage that. No, just let the actor be.
Girl.
Yes, I mean, definitely. I think, like you mentioned, room for experimentation and how crucial that is to actually making the actors not only comfortable, but actually improving the quality of the work that you have on screen. And I feel like both Aisha, you and Rolla have mentioned casting and rehearsals and being on set and allowing actors to have their room and space, even physically. Both of you have, shot across different locations, be it in Toronto or otherwise. And I noticed how there's the shisha bar in the docu-hybrid Ahwa by Rolla, and then there's also very familiar Toronto locations in your shorts, Aisha, that I noticed. I live in the same neighborhood as that pink pop-up place from The Drop. Yeah, I mean, speak to us a bit more, both of you, whoever, both of you can take this. Speak to us a bit more about shooting on location, on site, and working with actors there, and feel free to get into any nitty-gritties around, camera blocking or, workshopping with your actors about particular lines or scenes, or even before you enter the set, right? For your future projects, your feature films, Seahorse by Aisha and Shoot in the Gin by Rolla. Tahir, what is it like to prepare with your actors, whether it's narrations of the script or it's, getting the sense of the temperature of what the performance you want out of them? Talk to us a bit about working on sets and the early stages of production with performers specifically.
Well, I think that Canadian film is great, but I do think to correct myself, like Canadian film is so great, but I think in listening to Rolla was talking about like resources where you can really like live in an idea, and I think the more lived in something is, just the better it's going to be. So, Telefilm, if you're listening, I do think that Canadian film is great. Thank you for the money. But to address what you were saying, Aditya, I think when it comes to shooting on location and working with your actors, that kind of prep thing, like, I think the one thing that sometimes when you don't have a lot of resources available to you, you have to get really creative. And that, for example, this still right here, we lost location on the day. And so it's the first day that we're shooting. My episode of the drop was kind of difficult because it spanned many different locations over the course of our 2.5 week shoot. And so for me, it was like making sure that I could string all the pieces together over the course of many days. And so this shot we're looking at right now, we had a location, and then like what ended up happening was it didn't work, / like we weren't allowed to shoot there after all, kind of thing. And I think it just goes back to being resourceful, where like what we wanted was Mishka Thibault is in the crutches, and Daniela, or Danny rather, is in the electric chair thing. And what we needed was for the man in the crutches to be on stairs to get, and Daniela was not able to get to him because he was on stairs. That's what we needed. We had a great location for it. It was a commentary on like accessibility in accessibility in Toronto. And by the end, at the end of the scene, she's like, "This building needs a stopgap," because every building needs a stopgap. But anyway, to speak to that, it's just like when it comes to locations, it's like, yes, we did scout locations and it would be great, but like sometimes, especially when you're not working with a lot of resources, things fall through, and you're just like, okay. And you can't cry about it. You can't get mad about it because directing is very much so performative in the sense that you are leading. If your vibe is right, everyone else's vibe is right. If your vibe is not right, everyone else's vibe will not be great and it will not be a good day on set. And so sometimes, I hate to say it, but sometimes you have to go cry outside. And so we lost our location, had to do this other one. I was like, okay, what are the brass tacks? What do I need? I need stairs. And then you look around and I was like, oh, we can steal that little trailer because there are 3 steps for Mishka to hop up. And then it became this like happy accident joke that we had. So when it comes to locations and stuff, it's like, especially if you're not working with a lot of resources, like, yes, scout, scout, scout. And like, yes, like I shot list and I draw diagrams and stuff so that you know the general sight lines. And I guess my suggestion would be, and then I'll wrap up and talk and let Rolla speak. My general suggestion would be when it comes to the preparation of being on set on the day, like be so prepped that like if something pops up that you weren't expecting, you're able to pivot and take the time that you need to think it through without losing your day because everything else was kind of planned. But then also a lovely director named Eleanor Lindo told me go in with a plan, but be open to seeing something different. Like if something else presents itself to you, then like go with that. But like I think when it comes to not having resources, but even so with resources, like plan, shot list, storyboard, diagrams, those kinds of things. And then if you have the luxury of it, rehearsal. Like we didn't have the luxury to rehearse on the drop, and we were just like, everyone's going to be great, it'll be fine. And then for Seahorse, I had 2 rehearsal days for a lot of acting heavy scenes, and I just had to choose the ones that were pivotal to character. And I was like, I'll focus on these ones because if I can help the actors really sink their teeth into this, like a couple of specific scenes, then later on, like whatever else they play, at least they have this foundational knowledge to kind of like grow with. Because you can't, like, you kind of can't, we couldn't rehearse every single scene. So that's how I'd say I'd address acting and locations. Just be prepared to lose your location.
For sure. Locations were the biggest kind of like steepest learning curve for me. You have to prepare for them so much ahead of time. They are one of the biggest line items in the budget. And on top of that, you don't get locations to rehearse in, which is, it's not ideal. Let's put it that way. So in my case, we never, I don't think of, with the exception of my very first self-funded short film, which I shot in my own apartment, like you don't have access ahead of time with the actors to rehearse. You might get access with, the DP, your AD, but I haven't had the luxury of having a location ahead of time to rehearse with the actors in. But the way that I approached locations, I tried, because I knew that this was going to be, a low budget film, I tried as much as I can to limit locations, even though in the end we had a lot. But I also knew that I wanted this to be very rooted in Toronto. And so it was important for me to get certain external locations sort of sorted out ahead of time because I wanted the film to be like Toronto plays itself, basically. I wanted Toronto to play itself. But in the end, I think that, I'm not sure really if it informed a lot of my rehearsal with the actor, the locations themselves. But once we got there, we had a little bit of time to, at the top of the day, to walk through. Like I would do walkthroughs within the location with sort of like the lighting and camera crew. And then I would also have a walkthrough with the actors to also just see them in the space, see where they're comfortable. Obviously, like depending on, what I wanted, I would, lead the discussion in certain ways, but I would also wanted to get their input and see how they kind of navigate certain spaces and give them the room to, just bring in something to that scene themselves. But yeah, locations are tricky.
Also, to just hop off of what Rolla said, another thing when it comes to locations, because you were talking about walkthroughs, is especially if you're an emerging filmmaker working with less resources, you might not get access to a rehearsal, but you can treat your scout like you can at least, for lack of a better word, map out what you're shooting in your location scout. Like sometimes you're like, oh yeah, this is cool, this will do. But like the step further is being like, okay, if we were to shoot here, where would we put the actors? And then when I was working on Seahorse with Ian, whenever we went to, there are a lot of locations in Toronto, and we had to kind of narrow down where we wanted to shoot. And so we knew this movie lived on a 35 millimeter lens as well as a 50, and then sometimes a 25. And so he had his camera and he had his lenses, and then we'd go to a location, we'd be like, okay, and I would just start with, what's the most interesting thing to look at, or what's the prettiest thing here? And then I would stand in for the shots. I'd be like, okay, well, my shot list for this is like, okay, two French overs. And then I'd sit on a bench, and then Ian would take the picture of me. And then when I was shot listing, I would just pop that little picture into my shot list. And like every day on the set, and I did this for something else I just directed. It's a short film called Mothballs, where like on my shot list, I would have a copy of the shot list distributed to the AD, DP, production designer, as well as a script supervisor. And usually you can get between like 10 and 13 shots off in a day. And I'd be like, hi, everyone, this is what we're doing. And then like, and if people were confused, I could just zoom in on my shot list and be like, this is what we're looking for, this little thumbnail of a picture of me there 3 weeks prior. So we knew everyone was on the same page, and we knew what the coverage looked like. That way, when you get on set, you can just tell your actors where to sit. And then everybody just knows the shot we're working on. You could run away from set and your DP still knows what they're doing. And like sometimes you get there and the light's not the same, or it doesn't work, and then you have to pivot. But if you map out as much as possible, then you have the room in your day to think, as opposed to just executing, or breathe and do something fun and different. So yeah.
Wow, thank you, both of you. I think these were such invaluable kind of examples of experiences on set that both of you have had as directors, working with the crew prior to the actors coming in and during the actors actually being there and witnessing the set and interacting with the space. It was really great to hear, the kind of negotiations one has to make on the last day when things, don't pan out often as they should. Then being so prepared well in advance that you're ready for last minute goof ups. I'm wondering, in your future projects, there's Rolla's Dude in the Gin narrative feature film that was shot across, in Egypt as well as Toronto. And correct me, Rolla, if there's any other locations. And Aisha, your upcoming feature film, Seahorse, which I believe emerged out of your short Nola from 2023. Take us to your upcoming projects and what it's been like to work with the actors there and work with other crew departments like the cinematographer or the DOP, as you've mentioned. Do actors kind of factor into conversations with your writers? If you're writing yourself, do you think about the way actors will perform? Do you how early or late do the actors kind of participate in the making of your feature film projects?
Rolla, do you want to take this one first?
Honestly, for me, again, because my casting is very specific, it really depends on the, when we start outreach and what the result of that outreach is and how early we can involve certain actors. But in terms of writing, I wrap up the scripts, I do my script consultations with a story editor or a script consultant. And then, once things are pretty much final, more or less final, that's when I would bring the actors, or I would involve the actors. I wouldn't involve them, prior to that. But I never say never. I never know what, where life will take me. But I think the main thing is to understand when you're writing where there's room for the actors' input and where there's room to improvise. And for the most part, for me, it was just like there are certain kind of words, turn of phrases that I associated with, the character and that came to define the character, or sometimes character relationships. So like terms of endearment, for example, like I didn't necessarily want to change that. So when I select an actor, it's just a matter of like being clear about, these are more or less my non-negotiables, and these are the reasons why, but I'm happy to hear your feedback, because sometimes, actors, they might surprise you. They might have different kind of chemistry than you had imagined, and they would bring in different terms that you yourself didn't imagine. But it's just kind of setting those parameters as to, these are the things that I'd like to keep. And then as I tell the actors as they're reading and sort of rehearsing, if they have feedback as to, certain phrases that I wrote that might be unnatural, that seem unnatural to them, they can definitely, like, I'm happy to involve them in those changes. And it depends on, I write in Arabic, for example, and so my dialect can be different from whoever I end up casting, and these changes, might have to occur, and it's just a matter of like being flexible, but also understanding what are some of the things that are foundational to the story and to the character you initially wrote, so that you don't lose the essence of, again, what you're trying to convey.
Firstly, Rolla, that shot of that man in the library, that looks beautiful. Wow. I was just like, the green tones, I was paying attention to you, but I was also like really looking, because I was like, it's beautiful. I'd say like every director is different. And one of the things that I think as an actor, and I'll relate this to the rest of like how I look at creation in general, following an impulse. When you're an actor, they say like that like your movement should be motivated by impulse, like following your impulse. Like if you have the impulse to get up, get up. And I think when it comes to the creative process, I think it's similar. Like more often than not, if your brain is like, every project is different. Every person's like, my approach to making Alex is markedly different than like when I made a short film called Shoegazer. It's different than just directed a movie called Mothballs, which is about a puppet living in persecution. And it's just like, it like, there are certain things that I know within my process that are kind of consistent, but then sometimes it's just kind of like bespoke in the sense that like this project is a living, breathing thing. And like, if you picture a plant, it's like certain plants need light, certain plants like don't need to be in direct sunlight all the time and they'll burn. So it's just, I picture it like your project is a little plant that you need to water and like kind of like follow your impulses on how you think that you should take care of it. And so when it comes to actors, like in some, that's my friend Carly, it's my best bud. And so in some regards, I like have an idea of like an idea of a person who I'm like, oh, this person might be interesting, or I think about this person as I'm writing it. My friend Carly, I did actually not think about her for writing it, but then she read the script and she's like, oh my God, I love her. And I was like, okay, slide, like you can be her. So like there's that one facet of it. And then sometimes I write with people in mind. Sometimes I write not knowing who the person, like not knowing. Sometimes I write with like a person in my like that I've encountered in my life, but I don't know who the actor is. And sometimes it kind of starts with actors, like this puppet movie. But the writer and actors came to me asking me to direct it, and they were already baked into it. So then I was just like, I had to kind of shape a vision around them specifically. I think it's just contingent on like the nature of the project. Everything is different. Like it's going to be different every time. And so like, yeah, it's just going to be different every time, and just like follow the impulse of like what you think. More often than not, if your gut is telling you something is the next step, like I need to hear actors say these words, or maybe maybe then you need to have a reading, or like maybe it's like, oh, I think before I can even think about like writing this, I have to find a location, like, which is backwards, but like you do you, boo boo. Like if you need to see a space to be inspired, then go off, So specifically with actors, I think it's kind of just like sometimes they're there from the inception and sometimes they're not. But me as a director, I'm like not a precious director. Like if someone, oh, this is the last thing I'll say. It was quite interesting. It's not me, it's Denzel Washington. Sometimes actors are like they're the people that are gonna, forgive my phrase, but they're your bullshit meter. Like sometimes they'll be like, well, why would I say that? Or you know what I mean? And like it is hard to listen as a director to that. But like there's one person on Seahorse. Her name is Ruth Goodwin, and she was consistently asking questions. She's like, well, this doesn't make sense to me. But then it forced me, and the easy thing to do is be like, well, I'm the director, so make it make sense. And that's fine. Sometimes you can do that. But I think the smarter thing is like, the only way that your idea is going to get better is by allowing listening, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listening to what others have to say. Obviously, if it's a bad note, don't take it. But she kept asking questions, and she was like, this doesn't make sense. And I'm like, well, if this actor is the human being that's going to be in the scene, human beings in the audience too might be like, what's she doing? You know what I mean? And so it bumps the logic. So when it comes to actors, it's just like, wherever they're there at the beginning, they're there at the last minute. Sometimes you send it out for notes. Sometimes they're like asking questions. Sometimes they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I think it's just a director's job to kind of be listening and responding to whatever those needs are and following their impulses through what feels right. End of TED Talk.
I mean, yes, I'm seated for the TED Talk. It was, I think it's so insightful to hear from both of you about, I guess, being nimble and being very flexible and kind of contextual in your approach with actors, and kind of paying attention to all the departments in the making of a project that can enable an actor and that can kind of make the relationship between you and the performer more interactive and fluid. I want to leave some space before we move into the Q&A for the both of you to, if both of you have any questions for each other, for each other's practice, and if you can also share a bit about your upcoming films, which you've talked about already, but a bit to the audiences about where and when we can expect your future projects, Jude and the Djinn and Seahorse. Before we move into the Q&A.
I have a question for Aisha, for the benefit of the people watching, actually, and also my benefit as well, because for the longest time, and I think also there's validity to this, but people with more experience would tell you to cast based on how well someone is acting and what their experience is versus how they look. But I don't want to sort of answer, but my experience has been that in the stories that we make, diverse filmmakers, diverse stories, it's not always, you have to pay attention to how someone looks, right? Like, I want someone to look like me on screen, So Aisha, please tell me what you think.
I agree. I think if anybody's seen the movie Sing Sing, it's a great, like, if you want to learn like their approach to making the film and like working with formerly incarcerated and incarcerated people and putting them on the screen in a way that does not exploit them, like, go look into how they made the movie. And I 100% agree with Rolla. Like, I think when it comes to like, especially when it comes to cinema, like auteur filmmaking, like, yeah, you might have somebody that, like, sometimes you need an actor to hit their marks. Me, I'm awful at hitting my marks. Every time we called action, I would not hit my mark. And that's not good. I can, like, 50% of the time I would hit my mark. That's not good. But I also think when it comes to casting, especially if you're looking for casting real people, you have to go outside the box of like pretty people that have diction. You know what I mean? And so, like, for me personally, like, we cast a person that we had to cast an unhoused person in Seahorse, and I was just like, we have to work beyond what we think an unhoused person looks like, if that makes sense. And then we ended up working with this lovely person. Her name is Zena, and she has experience with being unhoused, and I didn't cast her specifically for that reason, but it was because I wanted to challenge our narratives of like what those people look like. And so, to your point, Rolla, like, yeah, like, it's way more important for me to lean in and be interested on the person that's speaking on screen than to have like an actor, like, their lived experience is interesting to me, because what we're all looking for is for actors to bring their hearts and themselves to the screen. And what better way to do that than by like kind of going out of the box, Does that answer your question? I think I agree with you.
Sorry, I said yes.
Yeah.
The last question.
I can also just give a quick update on my film. So we're currently in post-production, we're editing, and we're also in the process of raising some more funds to get us through post-production. And we're hoping to start submitting to festivals end of this year, early next year. But it's hard to say when people can see it just because, we don't have a release date yet. We don't have a distributor on board, but hopefully sometime next year. Follow us on Instagram.
I'm manifesting Cannes 2025 for you, Rolla. Like, that's what I want deeply.
I thought you were going to say for you, and that's why I was like, prayers up for Aisha.
No, for you, like for me too. But I'm also but more so for you.
Cannes is a whole can of worms for a different panel.
Yes, Cannes is a can of worms, but it's a can of worms that'll platform you to direct Marvel movies, and that's where you make money. What am I doing? I'm working on Seahorse. I'm in the same boat as Rolla. We put all the money we had on the screen, and now we got to raise more money to finish it. We will probably not have a working cut until 2025. So that's where we're at. But for now, like, I directed this fun little puppet movie, which was like such a joy, and I'm a writer as well. So I'm just pushing my projects. I feel like a scalper outside of a stadium, being like, "What do you want? You want a rom-com? You want a period drama? What do you want? I got it." So that's what I'm working on, and then also just like trying to drink water and mind my business. Drink water and mind your business. Sorry.
It's a great note for us to segue into the Q&A. I want to thank both of you as well for, I guess, touching on some of the things that we didn't earlier, like the politics of casting and specific ways of ideating with your actors and thinking about your futures in filmmaking. You have very bright futures with your upcoming features coming up, so we'll definitely keep an eye out for those. I want to invite audiences that joined us today to send in some questions for Aisha and Rolla. Please feel free to enter into the chat. Okay, so we have a question. So have Rolla and Aisha, have either of you worked with an intimacy coordinator before, and can you perhaps talk about that experience as either an actor or a director?
I've worked with an intimacy coordinator in both facets. There's a lovely woman by the name of Matea Kennedy. I'm plugging her because she's really cool. Intimacy coordinators it's basically like a stunt coordinator, but for kissy, or for anything where for kissy, or for anything where performers might be in a relatively vulnerable position more so than normal. So, for example, as having to shoot a love scene, like I've worked with an intimacy coordinator, but basically they kind of help the director not have to think in some regards. The director can just be like, this is the vibe that I'm looking for. And it's all just sight lines and camera angles, really. So the intimacy coordinator helps put its bodies in space. So the intimacy coordinator, A, creates a clearing for performers to feel comfortable, but then B, helps put bodies in space so that if the camera's over there, the camera gets the feeling that you want. And then we also had to shoot on Seahorse, we had to work with a child, and it had to be like a bathtub scene. And so it's just and it was a little girl, and she's 5, but she was wearing a top, and it's fine. But then also there's all kinds of learned things that young people understand about their bodies. And so I was just wanted to make sure that this child felt, and the actor, who was the adult in the room playing like a father, that they both felt comfortable. And so Matea was able to advise me on that scenario. And yeah, it was just helpful to just make people feel comfortable so you can get what you want, because comfort is key.
I haven't.
But I mean, what Aisha said, it seems like it's akin to a stunt coordinator, akin to a choreographer. Were there moments while perhaps shooting Judith Jin, Rolla, or any other kind of film that you worked on, where there was like some kind of intense or particular choreography of actions, gesture, body language. It could even be a conversational scene where you feel like you had to perhaps bring someone in, or you yourself had to kind of be a little more physical in terms of gesturing?
I think there was moments of intensity. I can think of one scene in particular that required an actor to cry and also like tap into, you know, personal, however her personal process is. And I think in that moment, it's just a matter of what I did was just sort of take the actor away from, you know, where we were shooting and just let her know, like ask her if she's okay, let her know if she wanted to keep going. And, you know, in that instance, she just needed a bit more time in order to be able to tap into whatever she needed to get wherever she needed to get to. So I think for me, it's comfort is key. Communication is also key. It's always, and just like being, again, it's a personal story. And so it was easy for me to understand where she was at emotionally. And so, but also just reminding myself that I have to be aware of that in all situations. Again, I was working with a couple of younger actors, and I always had to make sure that not only just talking to them, but talking to their parents on set and making sure that their parents are also understand what's going on, that they're okay. So for me, it's really just about communication. And like, again, we're making films. There's no need for someone to have to go through anything traumatizing here. So just being aware of that, you know, being light about it.
We're not curing cancer. We are not.
No, totally. I love that perspective. It's bringing a sense of balance to the work you're doing, and it's also really, you know, just seeing the parallels between Rolla and Aisha's practices is so interesting right now, because they may seem quite different, but both of you have kind of traversed across different genres, and you know, are kind of working with actors in very specific ways, very nimble ways. And it's also really cool to hear that both of you have recently worked with child actors or younger actors, because that requires a particular kind of sensitivity as well. Yeah, I mean, if there are no more questions, I could ask another one. But okay, so we do have a question. Have you had Samir Hassan is asking, have you had to disregard actor notes because their context they might not be factoring in? Example, needing specific lighting for a shot that they might disagree with. Okay, yeah. Have you ever had to say no to an actor's suggestion when it comes to, you know, particular technical shooting, and really kind of, you know, use your voice and instead?
Yes. Oh, good. Ooh, I want to know. I'm a people pleaser, so tell me how to say no.
I think I'll just go back to what I said when it came to involving actors in the writing stage. Figuring out what your foundations are that you need to tell the story that you want to tell, and what your non-negotiables are. So in the instances I can think of, and I'm just not going to go into detail, but, you know, actors, they're very, not across the board, but some of the actors I've worked with are very self-conscious, and I don't blame them. They have to be in front of the camera. I would be, certainly. And so they want to appear a certain way, whether it's wardrobe or makeup or lighting in this example. And so I've had a few of these instances. And in that case, you know, there are certain things that I have leeway in. I'm trying to think, for example, maybe, you know, a particular pair of shoes is not super comfortable. Yeah, let's switch it. But when it comes to things that, for example, you know, that are more character defining, like, you know, in some instances, it was someone's hair, for example. They needed it to look a certain way. I disagreed. And it's just how you communicate something is really the most important part. But I don't have, definitely listen to their feedback, listen to their discomfort, and assess and weigh whether or not this is a non-negotiable for you. But I can definitely think of a couple of instances where I had to say no, respectfully and, you know, nicely. And in the end, like, no relationships were ruined. So thank God for that.
I feel like when it comes to, it's interesting because, like, for me, usually you can smell if a person like from early on, and then I might there's just something in my brain that says oh, maybe this isn't the best collaborator for you for this project. And so for me, usually what I say is like, there's sometimes you get a note and you're like, no, like it just like, it doesn't ring true. But sometimes I'm like, okay, well, why is this person saying that? And sometimes I do. Usually I just say, look, I can't make any promises, but like, I'll definitely take it under advisement because I also think actors can sometimes, I don't want to say be a little self-centered, self-interested. Like sometimes they don't see the whole scope of things. Like I was talking to someone recently and they're an actor and they were going to direct a film. And I was like, oh, how are you feeling? Or like, how are you feeling? He's like, I'm feeling good. I'm like, anything you're worried about? And he was like, no, like I've been on set so many times, like, and directors have directed me. So I think I know how to direct actors. And I was like, well, good luck understanding production design. Like there's a bit of a myopic nature sometimes to actors. They're very focused on themselves and they're very focused on their characters, which is good, but sometimes lacking the scope to understand how all of these things are working in concert with each other. And so for me, if I sense that there's something weird to begin with, I might like kind of just steer clear of hiring that person because I like to converse with them. And then if an actor does give me notes and I think that there might be something there, they're touching on something, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'll say, I'll take it under advisement and I'll try, but like no promises. And like more often than not, I do think about it because it might lead to something else that's great. It's just a question is just an opportunity to workshop, and more workshopping just creates great work. So, and then sometimes it's just like, nah, but I think it's like, I try to work with actors where they kind of, this sounds bad, know their place, like know where they to orient themselves in their role and to take up space within their role, but like they can't be being like, actually, I think we should change the lighting setup here, unless they have a damn good reason for why we should change the lighting setup, you know?
Wow, I mean, that's, yeah, I mean, so many invaluable gems that we are taking notes on from the both of you. The director's vision, is so crucial. And I think both of your practices are evidence of that. We are so excited as a community in film to kind of see the both of you kind of have, bright futures in film and, performance. And yeah, so thank you, Rolla and Aisha and Reelworld for making this happen. It was such a pleasure to be in conversation with the both of you. And thank you to the audience for questions. Thanks so much.
Likewise, Aditya. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Reelworld.